is stolen. She is the girl who you think made her own choice. The boy who was taken by blunt force. Stolen are the children who played in our front yards. They are the teenagers who we have learned to disregard. Victims of a society without changes. You see, sex and slavery have been big business for ages. Stolen isn't a result of our pride. A self-righteous country where criminals don't have to hide. Instead, we celebrate them as they make money off the backs of innocent lives. Stolen, you see, could be any one of us. My name is Stacy Jewell, and at the age of 19, I was held at gunpoint and abducted from Washington, D.C. and taken to New York City, forced into a life of prostitution. It was there that I saw girls as young as 12, white, black, any race you can think of, from any area you can imagine, whether it was urban or rural small towns. The demographics were extensive. See, there was no way to put a name or a face on us. Instead, we were all gathered together like a herd of sheep being led to the slaughter. We were slaves. However, we had invisible chains. We looked like entrepreneurs, those who were sophisticated with criminal activity. We were arrested and charged, some with child prostitution, some as adults, while our traffickers, our pimps, those who exploited us walked free. Those who purchased us had no consequences. For me, this was 13 or more years ago. But for many, that is today. Often I say to others, if you could see right now that there were slave masters, would you step in while they were in the process of whooping or beating one of those slaves? Many would just look and they would laugh and they would say, that's not today, but it is. Because every girl that you think is just out there in the middle of the night selling herself many times are being beaten mentally and emotionally, held captive by those who seek profit. They are taken from our neighborhoods. They are taken as they are walking down the street on their way to school, sitting at the bus stop, taking rides from people who claim to be safe. You think now that this doesn't affect you. We as a country believe that it isn't our business. This must be somewhere foreign. But the reality is, it's right here today in your neighborhood, in your city, in your town. These children, whether they have parents with wealthy statuses or they are poor, they are all subject to being victims. Today, as a survivor of sex trafficking, me and other survivors, we lobby to our politicians, we go to Congress, we tell them the urgency of making this situation a priority. But there's one particular area that we tend to forget, and that is educating our children. Telling them the risks. Letting them be aware that what has been deemed as popular culture is a threat to their life. What do I mean by this? You see, when I was out there in this lifestyle that was my prison, I learned very quickly that what we learned as pimping, something that has been made popular in today's television and media culture and songs, and the kids themselves say it as if it means something to be proud of. Many of them every day are finding out that they are enslaved by the very songs and the very lyrics that they proclaim. We as a society have become so nonchalant about this crime that even a stage like the Oscars would allow the very first hip-hop song to be performed called "It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp." This is how far we have sunken as a society. And every day, with organizations like Who is Stolen, and organizations where survivors have tried to lend their voices to change, they are pushed away by funding. They are ignored. They are fighting against the disbelief that Americans have that this exists today. But I guarantee you that every child that wishes someone would remember their name is desperate for you to believe. The only way that we can create change is by starting with our neighborhoods. Parents who decide that they don't want to report their teenager missing because maybe they believe they're just rebellious. Maybe they believe the story that they just want to be with their boyfriend or run away because of the conditions of their household. There's a possibility that your child is being manipulated and taken advantage of and forced into slavery. File the missing report. For the teachers who have just gotten exhausted with students who don't want to be there, who show no interest in what they're teaching, remember, this is a safe place. Care enough to talk about it. Education systems believe enough to bring programs like the ones we support into your schools. It could save their lives. But the truth is, the ones who need to know the most are the ones who are being taken every day. Tell your children, open your eyes. When you're leaving establishments in the middle of the night and you see these girls on the corner, don't just shrug your shoulders because she may be only 13. She may be only 14. Slavery is among us. So I ask you, what are you going to do? For me, I was just like many of the average children who have dreams and desires to be a superstar. You can't help it. That's what you see on TV. You have your idols, your favorite musicians, your favorite actresses, and I had many. Like my father used to say, I could turn anything into a stage. So it didn't matter where I was always performing. I was always doing theater. I was always just trying to be in the limelight. That was something that was near and dear to my heart. I remember being with other friends, and we would pretend to be girl groups, and we would pretend to do our own TV shows and host our own talk shows. It's just that love of that creativity that I had that really had been there to me since I was born. I think I must have came out the womb and thinking, where's the camera? Here I am, flash, And, after coming out of my trafficking situation, it can feel very dismal. It can feel like there's not a lot of hope. Luckily, my faith is what kept me not wanting to go back. But a lot of it was my desire for the arts. It started off really small, where I realized, because of the lies that I had to tell on a regular basis, that I couldn't really be verbally honest. But when I wrote things down, it was always the truth. And then I kind of realized that I was keeping a very incriminating journal that I didn't want anyone to find. So I got rid of that one and began to write creatively the truth. And I started realizing that it sounded really good. And it was spoken word, it was poetry. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, that's awesome. And I ventured into an open mic. I think it was an event, and there were poets up there. And there were poets up there talking about some of the most horrendous things that they had gone through. And they were talking about their abuse, or they were talking about, different conditions. And they were just heartfelt, and they were sincere. And one day I got the courage and I said, they can do it, I can do it. I can get up there and I'll talk about the most dismal thing that happened to me, because I watched someone else do it and I watched them get empowered by it. So I got up on an open mic, and I had, my very first poem was called The Game. And I talked about life or death. And I talked a little bit about feeling trapped. And I got this round of applause for my honesty. And I thought, oh my gosh, these people love my honesty. My truth matters to someone. They like it. And I just couldn't stop myself after that. I just always wanted to do more spoken word. I always wanted to continue writing the truth, because I thought, through the arts, you can tell it and you can control it. You can be honest and you can be creative all at the same time. So I can turn my truth into a stage. Yay! This seemed like the greatest outlet for me, and it's really what helped me survive every day, because I had something that I can hold on to, because it was taken from me. When you're captive, you're not going to the movies. You're not going to see plays. You're not going to hear artists. You're not going to concerts. It was a part of it was a part of who I was, that when I found it again, it made me whole. And I thought to myself, if these other poets and these other spoken word artists can tell their truth and empower them and then empower me, then maybe I can do the same thing, take my truth, turn it into spoken word or poetry or a play or some form of art, and empower someone else and then educate them. I realized that some of the greater educators are artists, because you have an audience that has to listen to you if they buy the ticket, or wants to listen to you because of your creativity, but you can teach them. You can make them aware of the truth. You can empower others with your truth, and you can continue to speak about the realities of life and who you are and what means the most to me, and that is art. And it engages people too. It doesn't make them run away from my truth. It was a big difference I noticed from when I said, hey, I was a victim of sex trafficking, and the reaction that they have when they're listening to my poem about my story. It keeps them engaged with me and delivers the message the way that I feel makes the biggest impact. And so that is my artist journey and why I started doing this in general. I started doing this, one, because I wanted to tell the story, and then it became a journey to help others tell their story. And it's just grown into forms of education, because it's much easier to get a classroom of children to listen to my spoken word piece and sit through a performance than to look at educational slides. It's much easier to help an audience of doctors relate to the impact that this has on their community through a performance. It gives you the ability to touch all audiences, create a urgency, bring a call to action, as well as they directly relating to you. So it's everything. It's why Who Is Stolen was born, because there are so many survivors that no longer want to identify with being a survivor. But they are artists, they are singers, they are dancers, they are actresses, they are poets. And what I find very ironic is that many traffickers today actually lure victims away with these promises. I'll make you a star, I'll make you a model, I'll make you a singer. They get taken, and the arts are taken from them. And so this is the way also to bring that love back to the victims, as well as educate those who need to know about this. So I was able to really use my first love and use it now to not only tell my truth, but create change. I feel free from this, and I feel enslaved in two different ways. I feel free in a sense that I'm no longer captive to this. I'm no longer attached to this lifestyle. I no longer think about going back on a regular basis. I no longer identify with it, but a slave to it because it's always a part of my story. As a survivor, this, especially as public knowledge, people know what happened. They believe the stigma that comes around it. And I have a constant task of proving the victimization behind it. Questions like, are you sure it wasn't your choice? Why didn't you run sooner? Questions like, didn't you get money? Didn't you use that money for yourself? Questions that they wouldn't ask a victim of rape, but they'll ask a victim of sex trafficking because they just have a lack of understanding. So in that sense, I feel enslaved. But in another sense, I also feel like I must talk about it. I must tell my story. I must let people know that it can happen to you or your child or anyone around you. So I don't want to escape it. Because until there are more children that are free, then I'll be right here with them. I let go of the shame by letting people know the truth, because the more I let it out, the less anyone can hold it over me, the less I'll hold it over myself. I let go of the shame by teaching others, because I feel like I'm helping to protect so many. So instead of it becoming a staying with me as a sense of shame, it now becomes a sense of empowerment, because I know that I'm using it to save lives. And it's the only way. The truth is, I am more than a survivor. I consider myself an overcomer. Surviving is just making it out of the situation that I was victimized in alive. And for a very long time, that is what I was. I started off just being a victim, learning what happened to me, experiencing the everyday pains of it. And then I began to stand a little stronger and identify as a survivor, because I was no longer in it. I made it out. I escaped. I walked away. I was breathing. I was living. And I had watched so many girls who didn't make it to see another day. I had watched so many children who lost their lives to this. The average lifespan for a child caught in sex trafficking is 7 years. I watched so many become lost. So for me, just remembering that my name was Stacy, remembering that I loved to act and dance and create, was surviving. What I want people to know and to just take from this conversation is that sex trafficking is real. It's relevant to you, relevant to your community. It's relevant to your children, and it is worth paying attention to. There are resources out here that are available if you feel trapped, if you are in this situation and you don't have anyone that you can talk to. There is a hotline that you can call, and that number is 1-888-3737-888. If you're in an emergency, you can call out for help, and there are people that are standing by waiting to assist you. If you're trying to figure out how to teach your community, how to educate your students, you can go to websites like www.whoisstolen.com. There, I use performing arts and creative art methods to train, to educate, and make communities aware of what's happening every day. There are websites like Polaris Project and reports from Shared Hope International. These organizations can tell you about the laws that need to be changed so that you can lobby and write letters to Congress and make this a priority, not just in your household, not just in your community, but also in your city, in your state, in the country. This is important to me because when I was 19 and I was out there with those girls that were 12 and 13 years old, I remember looking into some of their eyes, and I thought to myself, when I am free, I will come back